flew out that
both
morning.
Yeah, we both had to.
Yeah. We missed you.
Is everyone ready? Any final words? We're all set.
Good.
Okay, and Yabra and Karen, well, if it's a smaller group, we may end up just having everyone with their cameras on at the start, but we'll probably invite people to turn their cameras on more for the Q&A section of it.
Okay, and Karen, I'll let you do the
small...
intro on our end. I don't need to do it. You can go ahead.
Oh, we can't hear you, Karen.
We weren't going to do much of an intro, yeah,
Okay.
but I don't know what you thought we would go straight into, because I think it's been introduced already.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going live. Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of seconds. Great. Well, welcome everyone to our live field trip. This is a exciting session. We're going to be doing something a little bit different. Don't worry, you won't be getting wet. It's as close as we can come to the real experience, and our partners at the Bahamas Reef Environment Educational Foundation, BREEF, have done a fantastic job to put this together. So we are in meeting mode now. The first probably around 45 minutes will be a presentation, and then we'll go into Q&A that will be moderated by me. For those of you who haven't been to a session yet, my name is James Elsmore, and I've been the Master of Ceremonies for this week. And just to get started, we're going to do a quick poll. So I'm going to launch that now, just to find out who is joining us today. So you should see that now on the screen in front of you. First question is asking which sector you represent, and the second one, which region you are joining from. And I can see over 50 people who've joined so far. That's fantastic. We'll probably have a few more coming in later. And also, please go ahead and drop in the chat your name, organization, and country that you're joining from, as well as answering in the poll. So if you could go ahead and drop that in the chat, that would be fantastic. Just 2 more seconds on the poll. And I'm not seeing any messages coming through, so don't be shy. Go ahead and tell us in the chat where you're joining from. But in terms of sectors, over 60% from NGOs, and then a mixture from other different sectors. And then, as you might expect, 84% of people joining from the Caribbean. And I can see now people joining in the chat, people from Jamaica, St. Vincent, Nassau, St. Kitts, from the US, all over. All the messages are coming in now. You weren't shy. So people coming in from all over. Just a reminder, this session will be being recorded and is also being live streamed to Facebook. So feel free to share the video there for other people who maybe haven't joined other summit sessions to watch as well. But that's it from me. I guess final reminder is we don't have Q&A because we're doing, we don't have a Q&A option rather, because we're doing this in meeting mode. So do type in your questions in the chat box. I'll make a note of those as we go through. And then at the end of the session, we can all turn our cameras on again, and we'll have it a bit of a group discussion. I might call on some people to ask some questions as well. So with that, I will introduce our colleagues at BREEF, Mallory and Kaswarina, and over to you all. Looking forward to this exciting diving expedition.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, James, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Kajarina McKinney-Lambert. I'm the Executive Director of BREEF, which is the Bahamas Reef Environment Educational Foundation. I'm also a founding board member of the Bahamas Protected Areas Fund. And it's great to have so many colleagues from the Bahamas and people from elsewhere here in this session, and we hope it will be fun and interesting. It is a beautiful, perfect, flat, calm day in the Bahamas, and I wish that we were able to take you underwater for a real field trip. Nevertheless, it's great to be able to give you a virtual tour of our BREEF Sir Nicholas Nuttall Coral Reef Sculpture Garden. And I hope that you'll be able to visit us in person at some point in the future, and please reach out to us when you can come. As we go along, please do ask questions or put in comments. We'd love for this to be a dialogue and a discussion at the end. And we'll try to answer some throughout as well. Thanks. So BREEF is the Bahamas Reef Environment Educational Foundation. We're a non-governmental organization that was established by the late Sir Nicholas Nuttall in 1993. So BREEF was created out of a concern for the declining state of our marine environment, even 26 some years ago, especially focused on coral reefs and fisheries. Fisheries like the Nassau grouper, the queen conch, and crawfish are Bahamian spiny lobster. From its inception, BREEF has been an advocate for marine protected areas and for increased protection of our marine environment. Our mission is to promote the conservation of the Bahamian marine environment that sustains our way of life, very much connecting people and the environment. Our work is hands-on and fins-on. Here are some children from San Salvador getting into the water, putting their heads underwater, and really experiencing the marine environment. Although the Bahamas is an archipelago of over 700 islands encompassing over 100,000 square miles of ocean, many of our citizens don't yet go in the water, and we're working to change that. So we have a quick poll right now just to get a little bit of feedback from you. And James, if you can pop that up, that would be lovely. We're interested to hear if any of you have visited any underwater sculpture gardens, including the one in the Bahamas, but maybe some other ones elsewhere. And also trying to get a sense whether you've been snorkeling or diving in the last couple of months. Okay. Okay, great. So it looks so far that's, oh, there we go. Perfect. So about 3/4 of you have not yet been to a sculpture garden, and about 1/4 of you have. So we hope that we will change that soon and entice you to come and see ours, or visit one of the other ones in Mexico or Grenada or elsewhere. They really are pretty exciting ways of reaching a different audience and getting people excited about art and conservation. And then it looks like 86 of you have not been snorkeling or diving in the last 3 months. So hopefully now that the waters are warming up, you will get a chance to do that. Let me get rid of that. Okay. Can you see my whole slide, or do you see something on the side that's blocking it?
It looks fine to us.
It looks fine.
Everything.
Okay. Great. So in this virtual field trip presentation, we are going to talk a bit about coral reefs and the benefits that they provide, and then we'll talk about some of the threats to coral reefs. And it really was a desire to address these threats in a creative way that was the inspiration for the installation of the BREEF Coral Reef Sculpture Garden. We will then take a virtual dive at the sculpture garden and show you some of those pieces of underwater art that have become living artificial reefs. And we will show you some of the species that now make the sculpture garden their home. This site is also one of our coral nurseries, so we'll talk a bit about coral restoration and the work that we're doing there as part of the Reef Rescue Network. We'll also discuss the way we use this site and our marine environment in general as an underwater classroom to inspire the next generation of environmental stewards. So a coral reef is a wave-resistant limestone structure built predominantly by the accumulation of coral skeletons over hundreds and thousands of years. A reef is made up of tiny colonies or large colonies of tiny invertebrate animals living in close relationship with many other marine organisms. Worldwide, reefs are home to more than 4,000 species of fish, 700 species of coral, and thousands of other plants and animals. They really can be considered the rainforest of the sea. And 1/3 of the Caribbean region's coral reefs are located right here in the Bahamas. So we have a huge privilege to be stewards of these reefs, and quite frankly, a huge responsibility to protect these reefs for the future. I'd like to jump into a little video from the Living Oceans Foundation that describes how coral reefs grow and build over time.
A coral reef. It can be one of the liveliest places on Earth. But what's really surprising is how much more goes on here than meets the eye. Even the corals themselves are alive. They're made up of tiny animals called coral polyps, distant cousins of jellyfish. Hundreds, even thousands of polyps can make up a coral. And this impressive reef, they built it, millimeter by millimeter. How? A polyp is mostly stomach, with a mouth on top. It sits in a hard skeleton that's part of the reef. The polyp takes in dissolved minerals from the water and mixes them with proteins. Then it rises up out of its skeleton, leaving space below. It deposits calcium carbonate, also known as limestone, into this space. Over time, each little polyp not only builds its own skeleton, but adds to the structure of the reef. So what gives the polyp the energy for all this building? A unique partnership. Inside most reef-building polyps are tiny algae called zooxanthellae. They use energy from the sun to photosynthesize, producing up to 95% of the food the corals need. As animals, the corals emit nutrients valuable to the algae too, and also give them a protected place in which to live. This trade-off benefits both the algae and the corals. It's called a symbiotic relationship. The algae are even responsible for the colors we identify with corals.
Okay, so as we saw in that little film, corals get 95% of their food and energy from zooxanthellae. But we need to remember how sensitive these special symbionts are to environmental conditions, such as increasing sea temperatures. We're going to discuss this a little bit more when we're talking about threats to these precious ecosystems. But first of all, I want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits, because I think sometimes we forget them. We talk about coral reefs as being something that people in the environment field care about, but there's so much more than that. Reefs are estimated to provide over $30 billion per year globally in ecosystem services, and I'd like to touch on some of these benefits. Here in this whole region, we're at the start of hurricane season, and coastal protection from storms is on everyone's minds. Coral reefs provide critical protection from major storms and hurricanes, breaking wave energy by up to 97%, and they're able to break wave height by 84%. In the Bahamas, we have over 2,200 miles of coastline and the third longest barrier reef in the world, the Andros Barrier Reef. Coral reefs really are our first line of defense as nature's breakwaters. Coral reefs provide essential habitat for key species, and they support tremendous biodiversity. That picture in the top right is a compilation. There's no reef that quite looks like that, but that's from some of our educational materials, a poster that we use to teach Bahamian children about the importance of coral reefs. But many life-saving pharmaceuticals have been discovered from species found on Bahamian coral reefs. Our reefs sustain tourism. Tourism is our #1 industry, including hotels, beaches, seafood, snorkeling, diving, yachting, and all the supporting jobs that go along with them. The Bahamas brings in over $114 million from coral reef associated shark diving every day. We are the shark capital of the world. Coral reefs also provides food security. 3 billion people worldwide depend on fisheries for food, and much of this is from coral reefs. And the sustainable harvest of seafood is an important component of our diet and our culture in the islands. These fishermen in the bottom right, Andrew and Aaron, are from my hometown of Governor's Harbour, Eleuthera, and they brought in this catch of crawfish before the season was closed, of course. So without healthy reefs, we'd lose many of these ecosystem goods and services. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about threats to coral reefs. There are a number of anthropogenic threats to coral reefs, and I want to talk about them because they really were the inspiration for the creation of the sculpture garden. We've been able to teach so many people about them by getting this firsthand, hands-on, fins-on experience. Climate change is the big one. Our continued use of fossil fuels is resulting in the world's oceans absorbing much of this excess carbon dioxide, resulting in ocean acidification, and also absorbing much of the heat of in the air, resulting in ocean temperatures rising and coral bleaching taking place. Corals are particularly vulnerable to warming waters. They are the proverbial canary in the coal mine. And as we plan for a new post-pandemic normal, it's absolutely essential that we prioritize climate resilience. The Bahamas, as a small island developing state, must make the shift away from fossil fuels and also away from the idea of oil exploration and towards renewable energy. We have to be the small but mighty drivers of climate action, and now is a critical opportunity to do this. Habitat destruction from unsustainable coastal development. The picture on the left, you can see runoff from land, ship groundings and physical damage, people standing on reefs, and also destructive fishing practices have all caused significant damages to coral reefs. Overfishing and unsustainable fishing practices threaten the ecosystem balance on reefs. Problems arise when harvest is faster than nature can reproduce. And also when we harvest species during the closed season. The picture on the far right is a crawfish with eggs. When we take juveniles before they've reached sexual maturity, or we fish heavily for apex predators like sharks or other critical species like those parrotfish that you can see on the left. Pollution comes in many forms. The picture on the left is actually from a NASA power plant located just east of our coral reef sculpture garden. This photo was taken a few years ago, and the oil slick coming out of it was a daily reality that we were facing. The building of the coral reef sculpture garden drew attention to this environmental problem and helped instigate a cleanup. It's now once again a great place to swim and dive. Plastic pollution is something that we're all facing together. And I'm very proud to announce this year that the Bahamas implemented a single-use plastic ban encompassing shopping bags, straws, cutlery, and styrofoam containers. We're all still dealing with tremendous amounts of plastic waste washing up on our shores. Invasive species such as lionfish are a threat to our reefs. These lionfish are the ultimate invader. They become sexually mature in less than a year. They can lay over 15,000 eggs every 4 days, year-round, and they have no native predators. But they are delicious, and we would have liked to have been able to serve you a lionfish snack when we get out of the water today. So just imagine you're eating some lionfish, because that's what we had in store for you. So we use the acronym CHOPPY to remind people of these threats and encourage them to take action. All right. So we recognize that we need a fundamental shift in the mindset about how we interact with the ocean around us. And we need to come up with creative solutions to get people involved in protecting the ocean that sustains us in so many ways. In 2014, BREEF created the Sir Nicholas Nuttall Coral Reef Sculpture Garden to commemorate 20 years of BREEF's marine conservation work and to provide inspiration and action for the next 20 years. This project was implemented thanks to the generous support of many donors and from a strategic grant from the Global Environment Facility's Small Grants Program as part of a Consumers, Corals, and Climate Change project that BREEF implemented in 2014. The centerpiece sculpture is the largest underwater sculpture in the world. It's 18 feet tall and it weighs 60 tons. And through this project, we've been able to engage thousands of Bahamians and visitors every year to learn about our waters and to get involved with protecting them. People who came and saw this project back in 2014, when we first put it in the water, are excited to come back again and see how it's changed over time. It's an exciting and creative way to address conservation, and I really, really hope that you will come back and experience it in person. So this artificial reef was created in a sandy area, and it's taking some of the pressure, the diver pressure, away from nearby coral reefs. The sculptures provide habitat and structural complexity for numerous species, and we've been documenting increasing abundance and diversity over time. We regularly survey the site with students and visitors as part of our citizen science program. And we found that the number of species surveyed at the site to have increased from 14 when we first put it in the water to over 105 species now. This picture on the right shows one of our interns surveying fish at the sculpture garden. The site is also our main underwater classroom. We teach marine species identification and ecology, as well as how to swim and snorkel. Over half of the students who we take out to this site have never been snorkeling before. It's a hub for science and research. We're monitoring water temperatures and coral bleaching and coral disease, as well as growth of coral at our coral nursery, as you can see on the picture on the right. This project is also a boost for tourism. It's been recognized worldwide and has been featured in over 100 media outlets. The Bahamas Ministry of Tourism regularly features the BREEF Coral Reef Sculpture Garden in their promotional materials. And this project is driving some of the larger conservation efforts that BREEF and partners in the Bahamas and elsewhere are promoting. In 2015, the year after the creation of the sculpture garden, the area surrounded was established as a marine protected area, the Southwest Marine Managed Area. This is a piece of water at the western end of New Providence that BREEF and the Bahamas National Trust and the Nature Conservancy and a number of other organizations and local businesses had been advocating to be protected. As I mentioned before, the oil pollution that had been a scourge for decades has since been contained at that site. And we're also working with government on ship grounding legislation to address physical damage to coral reefs. I'm now going to turn it over to our sculpture garden coordinator, Mallory Raphael, who will tell you more about the creation of the sculpture garden and to take you underwater to see it. And she's actually the diver featured in this Sport Diver magazine story about the sculpture garden.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katharina. It's great to be here, and I'm very excited to help take you guys on this virtual tour. So as she mentioned, I'm the sculpture garden coordinator, and I'm also now the research and environmental education officer at BREEF. And I'd love to share a video showing how we created the BREEF sculpture garden, created by Vice Media. And it will make you feel like you were there for the build. And I have to say that building those structures and then putting them in the water, and that day of that dive was just like the highlight of my decade. So I'm very excited. It was also the culmination of a lot of hard work for 30 days with volunteers and partner support.
All right, people, let's go diving.
This is the largest piece I've ever done, at 60 tons, 18 feet high. When we put the base plate down and we started to get the first piece in position, I just thought, God, how on earth are we going to do this? And have I made an enormous error? Almost a year and a half ago, I was living in Cancun, and a Bahamian artist, Willis Tynes, actually emailed me, and he had this idea to create a sculpture park for the charitable organization BREEF.
The reason why this project is happening is because when I was in school, I won my very first art competition with Bahamas Reef Environmental Foundation. We had vowed to use what I do as an artist in their conservation work and affect change in some sort of way. I ran across Jason's work and I'm like, hey, this is fantastic. Why don't we have one of these in the Bahamas? A sculpture park.
The Caribbean is set to lose 80% of its coral reefs within the next 20 years. Places like Bahamas, which the coral reef is one of their best assets, I think it's vital that the community rallies around and tries to protect them. This piece, this atlas, is all about the younger generation supporting our oceans and stopping them from collapsing. So it's this young Bahamian girl supporting the surface of the sea.
This is absolutely fantastic if we can bring somebody of Jason's caliber to do this, and also to have Bahamian artists involved.
The piece that I designed is called Virtuoso Man. The piece is to pay homage to the role that Atlas is playing, but also to recognize the older generation that's passing on this legacy.
I think it's been actually one of the most difficult projects I've ever done. The hardest part that I'm always worried about is the deployment, where there's waves, where there's changing light, changing conditions. It's very difficult.
Welcome to Judgment Day. This is the culmination of a year's planning and kind of 4 weeks of intense work. The bit that is the most stressful and the most worrying about the whole operation is we've got to get these layers over that pole.
And I look to the crane driver and he's got to line up this tiny little hole over this column with this big concrete weight. It's definitely complicated, but it's also very, very hazardous. If any one of those divers got a limb anywhere near the slices, it could have crushed them. It was definitely very worrying. You know, you can't communicate in the same way underwater. You know, I'm on the surface, and although I can see the sort of general outline of what's happening, to tell someone quickly is very, very hard. So we really needed a strict chain of command, and we all needed to be sort of really, really aware. It was a huge relief when the first piece locked into place. I realised that it actually could be done. As we built it up, the easier it got. We started off in sort of 18 feet, and slowly, you know, by the end of it, I was actually standing on the sculpture.
Even though it was such a grueling task to get it done, right now we're saying it was worth it. And hopefully those that come along to see these amazing pieces would be saying the same thing.
Everyone had worked so hard on this. I think it had pushed all of us to our limits of what we could take. So yeah, I think it was a huge reward at the end.
I was just completely blown away. I don't normally get emotional about this sort of thing, but it's just so beautiful. It's just everything we had hoped it would be. It was just a sort of wonderful meeting of what we try to achieve in BREEF.
People are going to see it, and they're going to be blown away. They're going to be amazed. They're going to be like, wow, this is what life is really about. We build these wonderful building structures, and then we also build art.
I always have to sort of remind myself that the piece is not ever finished. It's continuously changing and continuously evolving. It would be interesting how it looks in 10 years, 20 years' time, and seeing what changes occur. A lot of the man-made things are interesting, but the real sort of inherent beauty, the most spectacular form and shape and texture is the actual corals themselves.
Awesome. So that was an incredible video by Vice Media showing different aspects of that build, which did take over 30 days in the concrete yard at the AIP. So the sculpture garden consists of a lot of structures, and these are what we call reef balls. And reef balls are dome-shaped structures with holes in them that aggregate fish, or they can be layers, like this layer cake here. These don't have anything on them yet, but you can see a very porous texture that allows for attachment of sponges and algae and then corals. And we have a lot of corals on our structures already. So 65 reef balls make up the trail in our sculpture garden. And we created them from a special pH neutral concrete recipe from the Reef Ball Foundation, who also helped build the sculpture garden with us, that does not contribute to further ocean acidification. So these structures they're not going to break down for 200 to 300 years at least. So that's a very good thing. Other parts, the first big sculpture you see coming from the shore is called the Lucayan face. And the Lucayan face represents our ancestors and the original inhabitants of our islands, the Lucayan and Carib and Arawak Indians. So imagine swimming over that and seeing him smiling up at you. Storms and movement of sand has changed him a little bit, and his eyes are covered with a bit of sand in his chin too, but he's still there. The next sculpture is called the Virtuoso Man, which you've already heard about. He represents the older generation of Bahamians passing on that torch of conservation to the younger generations. And he's paying homage to the Atlas, which is about 20 meters away. So the main piece, the biggest one, as Kasarina was talking about, is our beautiful ocean atlas. She represents a young Bahamian girl holding the future of our oceans on her shoulders. She is an environmental steward calling for the protection of our oceans and our precious resources. The Atlas inspires our youth to take action and spread awareness of threats, especially climate change and sea level rise. So now we're getting to that nitty-gritty tour that we're going to go on, which is our virtual Coral Reef Sculpture Garden field trip. And it's a field trip that we went on with some of our young reporters for the environment and best scholars. So when we get to the beach, we usually give a briefing and tell them how to use the equipment and discuss safety and hand signals, as well as teach students how to identify fish by their colors and their markings. What you see coming up here in a second is going to be our coral nursery. After this video, we're going to talk about coral restoration. We're growing staghorn coral, and we've been growing coral since 2015. There's our atlas, and then the Lucayan face. And it's really amazing as an outdoor classroom because students can really see firsthand how the sculptures are evolving and changing and how they're being colonized. So we're happy to be able to offer this exciting experience to everyone. Next up, we're going to have a survey of our corals. You can see a lot of those outplanted corals. We've outplanted hundreds of corals now to help rebuild the surrounding reef. And they're going to build up that reef so the reef can provide and protect for us and do the jobs that, that coral does. This is the survey portion, so take note of some of the species you see here because we might have a little survey quiz at the end. This is a spiny lobster, Caribbean spiny lobster we also call crawfish. There's an intern with one, Nassau grouper, all things we might see on our sculpture garden, and we see stingrays regularly. This is a southern stingray with a snorkeler, snorkeling above. They're a cartilaginous fish with a stinger on the end, and they feed on the bottom, and as they disturb the sand, sometimes fish swim above them. These are yellowtails, a very favorite food fish. At fish fry, you might see a whole fish on your plate. There's Caribbean reef squid on the site. We also see lots of herbivores like parrotfish. Here's a trumpet fish. And that's a peacock flounder, which is very well camouflaged. And they have two eyes on the top of their body. The arrow crab has a pointy head like an arrow, and there's some blue tangs. And these are octocorals. These are soft corals actually growing on a reef ball, as is this diadema or long spine urchin and sea fans. These are all colonizing our reef balls. And there's a queen conch. And there's Allie. She's guiding some lucky snorkelers. One day at the site, we saw a bottlenose dolphin. We've seen even manatees there and sharks, nurse sharks, even a Caribbean reef shark, a little one time. So that was very cool. And the site is actually called Nari Nari, the dive site adjacent, which is the scientific term for spotted eagle ray. And in the winter months, especially January and February, we sometimes get big groups of these really majestic creatures that look like they have wings like an eagle. You see it swimming by our coral propagation unit there. So we hope that you enjoyed this virtual dive with us. We had a great time. And I am going to hand it back over to Kasarina. And I think at this time, James, we are going to go through the next two poll questions. So if you want to pull those up, James. There we go.
Okay, great. So just to see if you've been paying attention.
What are some of those threats to coral reefs?
Okay, so great, yeah. So all of those are, except for marine protected areas. We threw that in to trick you, and we really think that marine protected areas are one of these solutions to help protect coral reefs using an ecosystem based solution. So we can jump on to the next.
It looks like you guys did really well. Congratulations on identifying overfishing as a threat.
And all of those threats that you identified on there are things that we are addressing at this Coral Reef Sculpture Garden. So this is the survey that we put out to see if you can identify what took place in our underwater field trip. And there was a lot of stuff there.
So far, so good.
Looking great. So yeah, spotted eagle rays are often spotted there. Schoolmasters we do see, but we didn't have one on this in this little dive. And I don't think we had a trumpetfish. We did have a trumpetfish. And we saw a Nassau grouper. This is a critically endangered species that we're very concerned about in the Bahamas. We didn't have a hermit crab, but we did have an arrow crab. And we didn't show a sea turtle, but we do see quite a lot of sea turtles. And the Bahamas has fully protected all marine turtles since 2011. So we're seeing more and more turtles at this site and elsewhere. We did see the peacock flounder, and we did see a juvenile queen conch. So good job, well everybody. Okay. All right, so the Bahamas has lost 80% of its live coral cover in the past 50 years. And this is something that we're very concerned about and wanted to take action to address. At the Sculpture Garden, in addition to reducing the threats that we discussed earlier, we've been actively restoring coral since 2015. Some corals, particularly these type, naturally break during storms. And we collect fragments and grow them on our coral propagation units. These are monofilament fishing lines dangling from PVC trees and suspended in the water column. We regularly clean the algae from these fishing lines and remove predators so that these corals can grow 5 times faster than when they're down in the natural reef and getting less sunlight and having to combat algal overgrowth and predators. The coral we work with here is the endangered staghorn coral, Acroporus cervicornis. So when the coral fragments are big enough, we cut them and outplant them to degraded areas of the natural reef. So you can see in this picture that the progression from cutting these small fragments to seeing them grow on the coral propagation units and then outplanting them back onto the reef. Then we monitor their growth and we document any diseases or coral bleaching. Each cutback at the coral nursery allows for further growth. And this fall, we'll be monitoring our fragments and outplants for coral spawning. BREEF interns and volunteers get certified as reef rescue divers with BREEF and help maintain the coral nursery. And here's a short video that we created to spread awareness of our reef restoration activities for Endangered Species Day. and all other videos can be found on our website, BREEF.org, and we've now outplanted more than 200 corals back onto local reefs from our BREEF coral nurseries in New Providence at the Sculpture Garden and also on the Andros Great Barrier Reef. This has been a community effort. People have been getting involved in all sorts of ways. People have helped us with reef restoration and adopted corals, volunteering, helping with growing the corals, maintaining the nursery, and taking part in monitoring and biodiversity surveys. And we certainly appreciate financial support of people who have adopted a coral in the name of somebody who's having a birthday or whatever, a special event. We particularly appreciate being able to build human capacity by training the next generation of environmental stewards. Through our Eco Schools program, our school field studies, visitor trips, and our summer camps, we take thousands of young people out to visit this living underwater classroom. And I would be remiss without mentioning that, of course, the Bahamas is not just the island of New Providence, where Nassau is located. And when you do come here in person, I hope that you will visit many of the other islands, from Abaco and Grand Bahama in the north to Eleuthera, Andros, Cat Island, Exumas in the center, and then Long Island, San Salvador, Crooked, Ragged, Acklins, Mayaguana in the south. And although BREEF is based in Nassau, we work throughout the country, particularly in our education programs, training students and teachers. And I'd like to take a few minutes now to show you a short film highlighting our Eco Schools program that is helping inspire young Bahamian environmental stewards around the country and also connecting them with the world.
As a child growing up on the beautiful island of Eleuthera, I think I spent more time underwater than above. The Bahamas is a low-lying chain of islands spread over 100,000 square miles of ocean. We are on the forefront of the climate emergency, particularly vulnerable to sea level rise and to increasingly strong hurricanes. BREEF is the Bahamas Reef Environment Educational Foundation. We have a vision of a country where all people understand the waters around us and take action to protect them. Coral reefs are particularly important in the Bahamas because they are a home for many of our commercially important fish species. They also play a critical role protecting our islands from storms and hurricanes. Intact reefs can break wave energy by 97%. Our fragile coral reefs are particularly vulnerable to the warming waters. When corals get stressed, they lose the algae that lives in their tissues, and they appear white. If this bleaching continues for too long, they can die. At our coral nurseries, BREEF's giving the coral a helping hand. Growing coral floating in the water column that we can then outplant back onto the reef to help restore the reef in nearby areas. BREEF created the Coral Reef Sculpture Garden to draw attention to threats facing our marine environment. Ocean Atlas is the largest underwater sculpture in the world, and since we put it into the water a few years ago, it is turning into a live reef. Entire ecosystems are under threat. For many of our important species, we're eating these fish faster than they're able to reproduce. The Nassau grouper and queen conch are so important here, and in the Bahamas is where we have some of the last remaining populations of these species. We're working to create a fully functional network of marine protected areas, essential for the social, economic, and ecological future of our country. BREEF runs a program called Eco Schools in the Bahamas that challenges young people to observe the environment around them and take action to protect it. They're able to explore the mangroves and go snorkeling on coral reefs to discover the tremendous biodiversity and life beneath the waters. Deep Creek Middle School was the first eco school in the Bahamas. These children have developed an eco code that everyone in the school follows. They have eliminated single-use plastics from their campus. They're out in the field collecting water samples and monitoring the environment around them, and then communicating their findings to their community at large. There are currently 31 eco schools in the Bahamas, and these children here are joining a network of 69 countries around the world that encompass 19.5 million children. We are building a whole new generation of environmental stewards, and I'm so proud of what these young people are achieving. There's so much that needs to be done to protect the incredibly beautiful Bahamian waters for future generations. And it all starts with education.
Okay, so I hope this gave you a sense of the tremendous human and natural capital that we have in the Bahamas that is so worth protecting. This is such a special place. I hope we've been able to convey some of that to you in this field trip. And just to wrap up, I wanted to mention that since Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic, we have had to limit some of our in-person reach. And we've been creating resources to teach people about our environment remotely. We already have a virtual coral reef field trip and educator's guide that you can access from our website. It's relevant for the Bahamas, but it's also relevant for much of the Caribbean region where we have the same species. We have a program called Young Reporters for the Environment, which, like Eco Schools, is an international program that's operating in many countries around the world, where young people have a chance to communicate the issues and communicate solutions and really be part of developing these solutions. This is another project that we have support from the Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program, and we're really excited to be launching this year. It's great timing for this one. We hope to develop many more tools going forward, including an extended version of this virtual dive at our BREEF Coral Reef Sculpture Garden. And we will use this to educate and inspire the young and not so young stakeholders to get into the water and to get involved with marine conservation. So we're so happy that we've been able to take you on this virtual dive. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Also, huge thanks to BREEF donors and supporters who make our work possible. And thank you to our partners and collaborators in the Bahamas and around the world. And another special thank you to the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund for inviting us to be part of this CCI-SBF week. So please do keep in touch. Please join us using the contact information on the screen. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Catarina and Mallory. That was such a fantastic tour. I felt like I was there in the Bahamas. Wish I could have been. And I almost forgot it was a PowerPoint presentation. Those videos really gave the sense of place. So thank you. And I saw that the comments in the chat were similar. People really got a lot out of that. So for anyone interested in raising a question, you can either drop that into the chat or you can raise your hand. Not literally, but if you click on the participants box, you should see an option under that to raise your hand. And if you do that, I will call on you and open up your mic. So feel free to send in a written question or raise your hand if you want to make a verbal intervention, comment, question. But I'm just curious. I haven't, unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to go to the Bahamas yet, and I don't know when I'll get the chance again. But if I did want to visit, what would it involve? What's the trip like? I know you have to get to one of the outer islands. So how do I do it?
Well, we're a huge country, so we certainly encourage you to take your time. Don't plan to come to the Bahamas for a day or two. Come for a week, come for a month, you know, come for a couple months, and really experience the country. It's easiest to fly into Nassau, but then there are lots and lots of flights, and there's boats and lots of ways of getting around to other islands. So obviously the sculpture garden is located on the western shore of New Providence, the island where Nassau is. So please contact us and we'll help give you some direction. You can access the sculpture garden from shore, or you can go out in a boat. You can go snorkeling, or you can go scuba diving. So lots of good ways to get out there.
Thanks for that. And I can see a question coming in from Donna Blake. So Donna, I'm going to unmute you and ask you if you'd like to just share with us.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I work in TNC Jamaica. Fabulous presentation by BREEF. I'm very inspired, love your work. I was wondering about the sculpture garden. Could you share with us a little bit, like, how did you decide where to site it? What were some of the conditions that you considered when you were thinking about it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. We really wanted to create a project that was accessible to people. We wanted to create something that was within swimming distance from shore and also accessible during the majority of weather conditions. So where we are located just off the southwest corner of New Providence, directly off the Clifton Heritage Park, pretty much most weather conditions, and certainly our prevailing weather conditions, it's very accessible. So even when you've got heavy wind from the north, which makes the beaches not so lovely to go to, the sculpture garden is accessible. So that was one consideration. Water depth was another. We wanted to make sure that we put it in deep enough water so that we could accommodate such a big sculpture, and but shallow enough that it's really visible by snorkeling. We also wanted to have it near some natural reefs, and but also in a sandy area so that we weren't physically impacting natural reefs. But when you're doing a coral nursery, it's really helpful to have natural reefs close by, because those fish, those herbivorous fish, will swim up and help us do our gardening job of eating some of the algae that's growing there. So those were a lot of considerations that went into placing this. And then also to drive some of our bigger conservation issues, such as the creation of the marine protected area there and the cleanup of the oil.
Fantastic. Thanks for that question, Donna. And I'm going to prioritize people who put their hands up and are willing to say their question out loud. So do click on the participants button, and under there you should see the opportunity to raise your hand, and I'll call on you like I did with Donna. But I saw a question in the chat from Katie Metcalf, who was asking how the reef fared during Dorian. And I know that we talked before this a little bit about Hurricane Matthew, so maybe broadening that question in general to the hurricane risks and how you've responded.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is certainly a consideration, given that we're in a hurricane-prone zone. And I have to say, we were all pretty worried when Hurricane Matthew was heading our way a couple of years ago. That was a Category 4 hurricane that passed right over our sculpture garden. It did a little readjustment of our snorkel trail, particularly where the reef pools were. They're still there, but they got moved a little bit. But Ocean Atlas stayed right where she was, and we were very, very happy about that. We had just installed our coral nursery the year before, and that did take a hit as a result of the Category 4 passover. But we were able to recover some of the corals off it, and we actually used those coral fragments as the basis of all of these several hundred corals that we've outplanted since. Hurricane Dorian, that did quite a number on Abaco and Grand Bahama, passed to the north of us, and we really didn't feel any impacts from Hurricane Dorian here in New Providence.
Great, thanks for that question. And I can see another person, I can't see actual name, it says VPE Nation Builders.
Hi. Yeah, that's, this is Dr. Ancelino Davis. Hi, Katarina. Hi, Mallory. Thank you, it was a great presentation. You mentioned in your presentation that you had 14 fish species when you started, and now it's more than 100, I think. And I wanted to know where you're keeping that data and if that data is readily accessible for students or researchers, or what community-based research you're tying into for things like the sculpture garden and your other work.
Hi, Dr. Lino. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you, and thank you for asking that. We did do surveys, pre-deployment surveys of the Sandy area. And just to be clear, we're looking at other species, not just fish. We didn't have 105 fish species, but we've had others, including corals and things like that. We did early on set the site up as a reef survey site with the Reef Network, reef.org. Which enables people to go in and enter their data onto that, into that database. And there's different levels of reef survey skills. So if a beginner reef surveyor said that they saw a Moorish idol fish, which of course is only found in the Pacific at our sculpture garden, we wouldn't give it the same level of credibility as a more advanced reef surveyor spotting a Moorish idol at our site. So that information is available on the Reef database. And then it's a tool that we use for a lot of our visiting groups, partly as an education tool to go out and identify fish and then come back and discuss it as a class.
Thank
you. Did that
you.
answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great.
Great answer there. And I have another question in the chat from Hyacinth Douglas, who says, what an amazing story, and it is. There's no doubt that this should be replicated in other islands. Is there any knowledge document or how-to guide or any even just advice that you have maybe for people interested in similar types of projects? Or have you seen any other types of projects happening in other islands as well?
That's a good one as well, because we certainly want to encourage replication. We've had great success with this, and certainly the intention of the GEF strategic grants, and these are the GEF small grants that are strategic grants, the intention is that they will be replicated elsewhere. We would be happy to discuss with anybody who's interested in something similar how we did it, and give some guidance and feedback. We learned a lot along the way, and would be more than happy to share this information with others.
Grand Bahama has reef bowls too.
There are some other places that have reef bowls already as part of sort of restoration projects. It's worth pointing out that a natural reef, maintaining the natural reef is absolutely essential, and creating artificial reefs does not compensate for damaging or destroying natural reefs. So we want to make sure that that doesn't get confused. But there are places, and we think this is a great example of one where artificial reefs can complement natural reefs.
Great, and I'm not seeing anyone else putting their hands up, but just a reminder, you click on the participants button and you can raise your hand and I'll call on you there. But I know Karen McDonald-Gale from CBF had some questions. So Karen, if you're there, maybe you can just say them out loud.
Sure. Thank you again to the BREEF team. That was an amazing presentation. Congratulations. I had a question just about the maintenance of the garden. What is required for maintenance of the sculptures once they're in place? And then if you could add as well how you are paying for those costs.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last thing you said. How we are doing what? Paying. Yeah. Love it. So as far as maintenance, we do have some tie downs for Ocean Atlas because she's so high up in the water column. That's our extra lines to tie her down. And as far as monitoring, we've been monitoring coral growth, soft corals and hard corals on those sculptures. One of the things that we're working on right now, and have been from the get-go, is making sure that we have moorings around the site so that people aren't anchoring in a way that can damage the structures. This has been a problem and is certainly something that I'd talk and give some advice to for people who are thinking about doing a similar project, but making sure that there's adequate places where boats can tie up so they're not damaging the reef. This is something that we have been currently getting donations and that kind of funding support for. We do have some citizen science projects that are tied in with activities at the Sculpture Garden. And again, big shout out to the Global Environment Facility. We're using this as a special spot for our Young Reporters for the Environment program. So we have an ongoing grant right now that is helping support some of the work there.
Thank you.
Great, and we have Alison in now from Jamaica. So Alison, if you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so very much for that presentation. It was absolutely amazing. I totally enjoyed it, and congratulations. My question is related to your coral nursery. I know based on some of the nurseries that exist in Jamaica, there have been challenges, especially in terms of warming events, loss of coral for those reasons as well. I wanted to find out from you, have you had those experiences? And my other question is, you concentrate now on staghorn, but is there any thoughts to possibly looking at growing out other species at some point in time?
Yes, and in response to your first question about warming waters, we do regularly monitor the sculpture garden and the corals there at the nursery for bleaching. We do generally see paling in the summer months where they're losing some of their zooxanthellae, but we haven't yet experienced a major bleaching event. In fact, we've been incredibly fortunate, and I think fortunate's not quite the right word, but given the hard work of Mallory and the team that's out there really maintaining, keeping the algae off, we haven't had mortality at the coral nursery like other places have had. One of the components that is, yeah, one of the probable reasons, and actually another reason why we situated the sculpture garden where it is because we're very close to the drop-off. So you can swim a couple hundred meters offshore and you end up in 6,000 feet of water. So we're near the drop-off. We're not right on a big shallow bank that can heat up to really excessive water temperatures. So, and you had another question. What was your other question?
I was wondering if you were considering using or growing out other species of coral at some point in time as well.
So we are part of the Reef Rescue Network, which is a group of organizations and businesses that are doing coral restoration in the Bahamas. So sharing some of our findings with this group. And one of the other species that's being grown that we've been collaborating with, although not at the sculpture garden, is Acropora palmata, the elkhorn coral. And so this is something that did historically grow very close to the sculpture garden and is one that we might likely expand to in the future.
Thank you.
And maybe others, maybe others. But there's some great work going on at the Cape Eleuthera Institute, for example, doing microfragmentation and looking at a variety of different species. We're also looking at the different genotypes of corals that we're growing within the species.
Thanks, Alison, for those great questions. I can see Van Burn Harry has also got his hand raised. So Van Burn, if you'd like to share your question.
Hi, good afternoon. The presentation was very informative and very interactive. Almost felt like you were there under the water. My question is about the Eco School. I'm just curious to know, it's a wonderful initiative, but in terms of what makes it so outstanding or differ so much from regular school, if you could expand a little bit on that.
this is something that makes me happy, let me say. So the Eco Schools program is something that was started by the Foundation for Environmental Education. It's based in Europe, and it's so different organizations, an NGO in each country around the world will take on the role of national operator for the Eco Schools in that country. So BREEF is the national operator for the Bahamas, and it's not creating a new school, it's going into an existing school and sharing content and helping the school establish an eco club. And there's a 7-step process that goes into getting a school signed up as an eco school. It's very much a student-led process, which is somewhat unfamiliar for the majority of schools in the Bahamas and in our region that are very much the teacher is telling you this. In the eco schools approach, it's challenging young people to be leaders and giving them the responsibility to effect change in their own school and then communicate those kinds of changes to their wider communities. So as an example, Deep Creek Middle School, the students there said, well, we don't want styrofoam. This was many, many years ago. They said, we don't want styrofoam in our schools. We're gonna have each child bring in a Tupperware, and that's where you get your lunch put in each day. And they changed their school. So they made it so that their school didn't allow any styrofoam on campus. And then took some of those messages home to their communities. And so what we're seeing here now is that it's often children who are driving change. And I've got to give a shout out to the Bahamas Plastic Movement and Crystal Ambrose, who's really been mobilizing children around the Bahamas to speak out against single-use plastics and say, hang on, we don't want this. We're the next generation. We don't want to have to deal with all this garbage that's being left behind. So although eco schools aren't a whole new type of school, it's a different way of learning. And it's also very hands-on. So in general, eco schools get their children outside. They use the environment as a living classroom. They often come on brief field trips. We get them out into the water. And hopefully this will be a shift going forward as we're rethinking education. We don't necessarily want children piled into a classroom neck to jowl for hours on end. Maybe there's a way of rethinking this and getting kids outside and using the environment to learn.
Thank you.
I can see another question from Leanne Roper. Leanne, are you there?
Hi.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for your presentation. It was very informative. The issue of climate change was mentioned, and I realize as well that the coral gardens seem to have stood the test from the last hurricane that really did quite a bit of damage to the Bahamas. And so I was wondering if the team could speak a little bit more to how climate change is really taken on board in the work that is being done, not only with respect to the Coral Reef Garden, but perhaps even in the schools programs and those kinds of things. Thank you.
Oh, that is an existential question for those of us who are living in small islands. The Bahamas is obviously very, very low lying. The highest point in our whole country is 206 feet above sea level. And the majority of our infrastructure and our roads and our schools and our hospitals and everything are very, very low lying. So we really need to shift the way we as a country address this and go forward. And at BREEF, we believe that education is absolutely key to drive action. And so we've been doing a lot of work through our schools program, through our field trips in teaching young people. In the Eco Schools program, climate change is a key theme that all children learn about. And we have confidence that these young people are, and we're seeing it, are growing up to be leaders to affect change. We're also seeing a lot of transfer of knowledge from children to their parents. It's sometimes difficult for us to go and talk to an older person about climate change, but if we can convey that information to young people and they say, hang on, this is our future, they can be very effective. We see that in the Bahamas, and obviously we see that around the world, where young people are demanding action and they're saying, this is not okay. And although the Bahamas is a small contributor to global carbon dioxide emissions and greenhouse gas emissions in general, we're certainly feeling the impacts. And it's important for the Bahamas to continue to be part of AOSIS, which is the Alliance of Small Island States, and form these negotiating blocks when it comes to participating in international climate conventions, those kinds of things. Not sure if that fully answered your question, but I think sometimes just getting out into the environment. I think I mentioned early on, a lot of our population hasn't actually seen a coral reef up close and personal, hasn't put their eyes on a coral reef. And you know, we have a vision for all schools to be eco schools in the Bahamas, and for all kids to have a chance to go snorkeling on a coral reef, and then understand what these impacts really mean to their daily lives.
Thank you for that, Kasparina. And you just reminded me of seeing a talk from the president of Kiribati in the South Pacific. Similarly has the highest point several meters above sea level, very low lying. And he made the argument about leadership by example. So yes, the emissions of Kiribati, like the Bahamas, are pretty insignificant on a global level, but by being able to make their own statements and taking action, it's kind of this idea of leadership by example, which I think is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, we are a country, I mean, it's so beautiful outside. I can't even look out my window because it's upsetting me so much that I'm inside and not underwater where I should be with you guys right now. But we really are the country of sun. And we should be the model country for alternative energy, for renewable energy, for solar especially. It would be, quite frankly, hugely hypocritical for the Bahamas to go down a path of drilling for oil, which is something that's on the table right now. And saying, oh, we've declared a climate emergency, we're very concerned about this, but meanwhile, we're going to go and drill for oil. So we really do need to lead by example. If we're asking other countries, bigger, higher countries, to cut their emissions, we need to demonstrate that right here at home.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking in the chat, can see Joel Timian said, thanks, BREEF. This is inspirational, as art should be. Robin Randim said, this eco school initiative is so progressive. He wants his son to be able to go to a school like this. That's fantastic. And I think Dr. Davis is back again with a question.
Yes, thank you, Kasharina. I had two more questions. One was how you are using the sculpture garden to really talk about these other issues like oil, because we often have the issue of oil out there on guests, and that can be a significant impactor to how much the tourists are able to enjoy it and how much Bahamians can enjoy it. But second to that, I wanted to know if you have any plans to make additional, more accessible coral gardens near locations such as like Adelaide Beach or, you know, Goodman's Bay or the Montague foreshore, where people can know something is there and swim out to it more regularly. Do you have any plans for either of those things?
To answer your second question first, we don't have plans to create another one. And we really like the location of this one. It is, New Providence obviously is the capital capital of the Bahamas, where the majority of the population lives. And although we're all the way out west and it's a bit of a trek, it is on the same island as most of the population. But we do find that when we take children out on field trips to all sorts of places, and we go to Goodman's Bay and we go to South Beach and we go to Adelaide and we go to Saunders Beach, the resounding comment that we get from these children is, I had no idea there was so much stuff out here. So I think what we're trying to get people to do is realize that, you know, we all live within a couple of miles of the ocean. And quite frankly, wherever you jump in the water, you're going to see something cool. You might not see these huge sculptures, but you're going to see crabs, and you're probably going to see baby conch, and you're going to see stingrays and spotted eagle rays and all of these things. This is on our doorstep. So we really want people to, we want Bahamians like myself to know that this incredibly beautiful, diverse resource is for us. It is not just for visitors to our country. Yes, it's important for tourism, but anywhere you jump in the water, you're going to be able to find interesting things. And sorry, what was your first part of your question again?
Well, first, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, the first part of the question was, are you using the sculpture garden to highlight the impacts of oil on the tourism economy, as well as the coral and, you know, fisheries related issues?
Yes. So when we first put the sculpture garden in the water, it was quite common for people, visitors and Bahamians, to come out coated in oil. And it was a horrible sight. It really was unacceptable. Depending on which way the wind was blowing, it was a very common occurrence. And so we did a research project, an in-house BREEF research project, where we floated little pieces of foam out in the water, and we collected them every single day, and we documented, got some really good documentation of this problem. And as you well know, we're data limited in the Bahamas, and this hinders our ability to make decisions. We're a huge country, it's hard to collect information everywhere, but in this situation, we really documented very clearly, we have a problem with this oil leak. We shared that with governments, and I think it was an absolutely essential piece that drove the cleanup and the containment of the oil leak at Clifton. That said, it shouldn't have happened for that long, and we shouldn't have had this problem that was impacting the environment and human health for such a long time, and really raises the question of, you know, are we able to tackle larger oil spills, given that it took so long to clean up this mess? And I would hazard to say that no, we're not, and we shouldn't take the risk of refining oil and drilling for oil in the Bahamas, given what happened there.
One very quick question from the chat. I can see from Gaia from Jamaica asked, how can university students get involved in these kind of efforts, and maybe even more broadly, if you have any thoughts for aspiring students that are maybe interested in a career in this area of marine biology and adjacent areas?
We love it when university students contact us. Although much of our work is focused on K through 12 students, and when we're able to do our field trip programs, taking lots of them out there, we also work with classes from the University of the Bahamas, and we take students from there out. We also often have visiting groups from the United States and elsewhere that are coming to do educational tourism. And I think this is an area that we really need to grow in our countries, and recognize the value of people who come and want to learn, and sometimes want to contribute and give back as well, and do working holidays. These are often people who want to stay longer than just a couple of days, and are really interested in understanding what goes on in the Bahamas, and what makes the Bahamas, and I guess each of our countries, unique. So we love it. We have a number of university groups that until this year have been coming every year. And there's a program that a lot of universities offer called alternative breaks during their spring breaks and their fall breaks, and they come down, and we often take those groups out to the sculpture garden. We love it when students want to do research projects. So if we sometimes get students contacting us and wanting to do a project on climate change or reefs, or, you know, some of the species that we work with, and we're happy to help support them.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I saw again in the chat, Guy had added that they're pursuing a degree in marine biology at UWI, so it's good to see students being involved here.
Great.
Okay, well, it's not really a quick question, and then we'll go to our final question with Karen. But before I go back to Karen, I can see this question in the chat. Sorry, I can't see your name, but it says, as a nation that depends, well, as our nation, so I'm presuming from another Bahamian, sorry. Are your efforts to preserve our marine environment supported, funded by local businesses in the tourism industry? And I guess what the impact of this change in the tourism industry has been on the work that you're doing, as obviously that's a huge issue across the whole region.
Yeah, and that's a good question. We're supported by individual donations and by corporate donations, and through our fundraising events that we do, and through grants. And this certainly is a challenging time. So what we found is that a number of local businesses that have been supporting us over the years are in trouble. I mean, particularly from a tourism-based economy, it's challenging. But I think we have seen that several of these have said, look, supporting BREEF remains a priority, and we will continue to contribute. So we're very heartened to see that. But we do need help. The reality is BREEF is a non-governmental organization. We're fully independent, and which makes fundraising challenging, but also gives us the opportunity to speak out and really be a voice at the table and make ourselves heard. So we do need help, and the more that people realize how connected our well-being as a country is to the well-being of our environment, and see the value in supporting the organizations that are protecting the environment. And that's BREEF and many other organizations here, and I know around the region and around the world. We hope that support will continue.
Definitely, and I did see at the start that I think over 50% of the people participating in this were from NGOs or the NGO sector. So I'm sure you're not alone with that struggle that's happening right now. With that, Karen, if you're there, we'll call on you to say thank you to our Bahamian speakers. Got the word now. Over to you, Karen.
Good job.
Thank you. First, I had my question, which was in the group, which was the hard-hitting financial side of things. Is the return on investment? And I know the ecological return on investment and the philosophical return on investment, but straight money investment for the sculpture park, has it been worthwhile? Was there a calculation of what would break even in terms of costs, and have you reached there?
Yes, we have. So to do the actual creation, we had a grant from the Global Environment Facility, and then we also had individuals and individual businesses adopt different parts of the sculpture garden. So had you been out there, and actually you can see it in one of the videos that we showed, you have a little plaques out there. So we welcome, and we certainly couldn't have done the project without people adopting a reef bowl and contributing $1,000 for this, and $5,000 for that, and really sort of we pieced it together, quite frankly. And going forward, so we were able to raise the funds to put it in the water. We have a grant right now to be putting in some of the mooring buoys that are going to protect that. And then our coral nursery is supported in a big part by individuals who adopt a coral. So I put that slide up there, showing how people can come to our website and actually adopt a coral, help us grow it out, and then also have a little plaque underwater. So a piece of your name or your loved one's name can be underwater at our coral nurseries to help support this work.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you as well from the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. Quickly to all of those who have participated. At one stage, we were at 107 participants. So we're very grateful for everybody staying and participating, and particularly to the team at BREEF. A group of us were there last November, and some of us, including myself, left way too early and did not do the dive in person. So we're even more jealous today of our team members who were able to go on it. thank you to Casuarina and Mallory and the rest of the team. That was really amazing. And I think everybody on the call, the 91 still here, remain inspired by what you presented. And then I hand over to James to close us off fully. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Please come and visit us in person. We would love to see you here when you can.
I'll be back. I will be back.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to the next scheduled field trip. That's going to be a good experience. You're definitely on my list to make that trip now. And thank you again so much. We'll echo what Karen said. Really, really fantastic experience to see what you're doing and see all of those videos. And thank you everyone who's been making the input in the chat. Been some really good comments and questions throughout. Just want to remind you that we have, unfortunately, our last and final session tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. It will be a 2-hour session, and we'll go straight into we'll go straight from that into the closing event. So it'll all be in one single session for 2.5 hours. And I'm scrambling because I can't see the name of the session in front of me. Just give me 1 second. Here we go. So tomorrow morning session is scaling up ecosystem-based adaptation in the Caribbean. And that will be moderated by Ali Raza Rizvi from the IUCN. And we have a range of panelists there that will be giving a fantastic talk. So looking forward to that one. And then you can just stay in that same session for the closing session. So thank you, everyone. That's it from us. I think we'll try and do, for those of you who are in the meeting before, we'll try and do again a quick group photo. So if everyone wants to try and put their cameras on, those of you who are still here, we'll get everyone together for a photo. And I'm going to ask, I'll take one on my side, but feel free to take them on your side as well. Oh, I love the background, Hayden, very patriotic. Great, we'll just give it a second. I can see a few more people joining. Great to see so many familiar faces here. Okay, we're ready. I'm gonna have to take 2 of them. So I'm gonna take the first one now. I'll count you in. Okay, 3, 2, 1, smile. And the second one.
James, it's not letting us unlock our videos, some of us.
Oh, it's not? I'm not sure why some people are allowed to and others aren't. Give me a second.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
The host has muted the video.
We're 3 feet away.
1 second. I'll take another one and then we'll unlock the rest of you. 3, 2, 1. Okay, and then for those of you who haven't, maybe if you can just tell me who hasn't been able to put their camera on, who wants to.
Me, Eleanor.
Camille.
Eleanor. There we go. We can see you now. And Camille, I'm turning on your camera now. Anyone else? We don't want you to miss out.
Joel?
Just turn on mine.
Joel, I've turned yours on as well. Anyone else?
There you go.
Okay, we've got you again. We'll do that. We'll do the photo shoot again. We don't want you to miss out. Okay.
Hi, Camille.
Hi.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
All right.
And one last photo. 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everyone. It's just like we're all on the beach together in the Bahamas, right? Really appreciate you all joining. Thanks for that. And we'll see you in the morning for our final session. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.